July 30, 1945. 12 minutes past midnight. In the black emptiness of the Philippine Sea, two Japanese torpedoes found the hull of the USS Indianapolis. The ship, which had just delivered the core of the atomic bomb, was torn open. It sank in 12 minutes. 900 men survived the wreck, cast into the open ocean. But for the next 4 days, the United States Navy would not know they were missing. This isn't just a story of a sinking. It's the story of a system that failed, of warnings that were ignored, and of a command structure that abandoned 900 of its own men to the mercy of the sea. The question is not just how it happened, but why it was allowed to. Just 4 days earlier, the USS Indianapolis had completed the most critical mission of the war. Sailing at a record-breaking pace, it delivered key components of the Little Boy atomic bomb to the island of Tinian. Captain Charles McVay III had pushed his Portland-class heavy cruiser to its limits. The mission was so secret, his crew didn't even know what they were carrying. After the drop-off, Indianapolis was ordered to Leyte in the Philippines for training, but McVay's request for a destroyer escort was denied. The reason given by operations staff? The risk was considered low, but the real reason no one was looking for them is far more disturbing. Naval Command at Guam had intelligence that at least 4 Japanese submarines were operating directly on the ship's intended route. One of them, the I-58, commanded by Makatsura Hashimoto, was actively hunting. This critical intelligence was never given to Captain McVay. According to the 1945 Navy Court of Inquiry records, routing officers considered the information unconfirmed, a risk they deemed acceptable. McVay was told the route was safe and he was not even instructed to zigzag, a standard procedure in potential waters, unless visibility. That night, visibility was poor, so McVay made the command decision to cease zigzagging to conserve fuel and increase speed. This one on incomplete intelligence would seal the fate of hundreds. The first torpedo hit the bow, igniting a 3,500-gallon tank of aviation fuel. The explosion vaporized dozens of men in an instant. The second torpedo struck midship, near a powder magazine, ripping the vessel in half. Electrical power failed immediately, plunging the ship into darkness. The order to abandon ship was given, but the catastrophic damage and the 12-minute sinking time meant only a fraction of the life rafts could be deployed. SOS signals were sent out by at least 3 different radio operators. They were heard. Yet, on 3 separate naval installations, these desperate calls were dismissed. One commander was reportedly drunk, another ordered his men not to disturb him, and a third concluded it was a Japanese trap. The Indianapolis was erased from the map. For the nearly 900 men who made it into the water, the first day was about survival and the firm belief that rescue was imminent. They were American sailors on a major naval vessel. Of course, they would be missed. But as the sun climbed, the reality of their situation began to set in. The Pacific sun was merciless. There was no fresh water. The men were covered in thick, black fuel oil, which burned their skin and blinded them. Many had suffered horrific injuries during the sinking. As the first night fell, the initial shock gave way to a dawning, unthinkable horror. The real nightmare had not even begun. Why was no one looking for them? The answer lies in the failure of naval procedure. When the USS Indianapolis failed to arrive in Leyte on July 31, no report was filed. The operations officer in Leyte assumed they had been rerouted without his knowledge, a common occurrence in the chaos of war. At headquarters in Guam, the plotting board operators, responsible for tracking vessel movements, had already marked the Indianapolis as having arrived. It was a clerical error, a simple grease pencil mark on a map, born from assumption. Because of this, the ship was not listed as overdue. As far as the Navy was concerned, the Indianapolis and its 1,195 men were safe in port. It gets worse. By the second and third day, the situation in the water had become a scene from a nightmare. Dehydration was rampant. Men's tongues swelled, their skin cracked. The salt water, which looked so inviting, was a poison. Those who drank it were driven mad by hypernatremia, a severe sodium imbalance. They would hallucinate, seeing islands, rescue ships, or even phantom Japanese attackers in their midst. They would fight their own shipmates, convinced they were the enemy. Many would swim off towards mirages on the horizon, never to be seen again. They were dying not just from the elements, but from the breakdown of their own minds. Then the sharks came, primarily oceanic whitetips, drawn by the explosions and the blood in the water. For the survivors, this introduced a new, primal dimension of terror. The attacks were not constant, but they were persistent. A man next to you could be there one moment, and gone the next, pulled under without a sound. The men tried to form groups, splashing and kicking to ward them off, but their energy was failing. The sharks were a constant, circling presence, a physical manifestation of the hopelessness of their situation. Hope was now the most dangerous thing you could have. On the fourth day, August 2nd, Lieutenant Wilbur Gwynn was flying his PV-1 Ventura bomber on a routine anti-submarine patrol. His Loran navigation equipment malfunctioned, forcing him off his standard route. Looking down, he saw a massive oil slick. This wasn't unusual. What was unusual were the small black dots in the slick. Thinking it was debris from a battle, he descended for a closer look. What the pilot saw next would change naval history. He saw heads, human heads, bobbing in the water, the men frantically waving. He immediately radioed his base at Peleliu, many men in the water. The response from command was disbelief. There were no American ships reported missing in that sector. Gwynn's report triggered a massive, impromptu rescue operation. A PBY Catalina seaplane, commanded by Lieutenant Adrian Marks, was dispatched. Arriving on the scene and seeing the sharks attacking the survivors, Marks disobeyed a direct order not to perform an open sea landing. He landed his fragile plane in the heavy swells, taxiing to pick up the wounded and isolated men, saving 56 lives. By the time the first surface ship, the USS Cecil J. Doyle, arrived near midnight, only 316 men were left out of the nearly 900 who had survived the sinking. The Navy had its survivors. Now, it needed a story. And every story needs a villain. The Navy's official story pinned the blame almost entirely on one man, Captain McVeigh. In your opinion, when a systemic failure like this occurs, is it ever just for an organization to place the blame on a single individual's decision? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. The Navy's Court of Inquiry convened, and in a move that remains controversial to this day, they chose to court-martial Captain Charles McVeigh. The charge, hazarding his ship by failing to zigzag. To secure the conviction, the prosecution took the unprecedented step of flying in Makatsura Hashimoto, the commander of the Japanese submarine that sank the Indianapolis, to testify against an American officer. Hashimoto himself testified that zigzagging would have made no difference. He would have sunk the ship anyway. Despite this, McVeigh was convicted. He was the only captain in the history of the U.S. Navy to be court-martialed for losing his ship in an act of war. The conviction destroyed his career and haunted him for the rest of his life. For decades, the survivors of the Indianapolis fought to clear their captain's name. They knew the truth, that McVeigh was a scapegoat for a far larger, systemic failure of naval command and communication. Finally, in October 2000, after years of campaigning, led in part by a middle school student named Hunter Scott, the U.S. Congress passed a resolution exonerating Captain McVeigh. The Secretary of the Navy ordered his official record cleared, but it was too late for McVeigh. Plagued by hate mail and the weight of a tragedy he did not cause, he had taken his own life in 1968. The story of the Indianapolis is a testament to the price of secrecy, the failure of bureaucracy, and the devastating human cost when a system designed to protect its own looks away. If you found this investigation compelling, please subscribe for more stories of the decisions that change history. In your opinion, when a systemic failure like this occurs, is it ever just